Welcome back. Time now for business here on France 24, for which I'm joined by Owen Fairclough. Hello to you, Owen. Starting off with grim New Year's predictions here in the eurozone.
Well, it's starting pretty much as it ended, Chris, even though we're supposed to be wiping the slate clean for New Year. The problem is many of those problems that we saw in the eurozone in 2011 are going to hang over somewhat, certainly for the first quarter of 2012, because there are so many flashpoints on the cards. Perhaps the biggest is the fact that collectively the eurozone countries, there's 17 of them, have at least 200 billion euros of debt to refinance in the first quarter. It'll be double that for countries like Italy, for example, a country, remember, which failed to find enough buyers for its latest issue of 10-year bonds just before New Year. You've also got those residual fears about where Europe's going. Are we turning into a two-speed Europe, particularly with the UK, for example, refusing to sign up to any closer budget harmony? There are lots of issues to be ironed out, even with the countries that are on board with that. Many of them, the likes of Sweden and so on, have individual demands which we're not sure can be met through this new so-called fiscal compact. The other thing as well, something we talked about a lot during the tail end of 2011, was the private investment side of that whole Greek second bailout. Remember that any deal for Greece depends upon private investors taking a so-called haircut. That's basically writing off some of their investments. That'll give Greece maybe around 30 billion euros in terms of breathing space. The problem with that is just before Christmas, one of those investors pulled out of those discussions, and there's concern that others may well go the same way should they be unable to meet the kind of demands of the Greek government and indeed of those investors.
And meanwhile, the single currency itself under intense pressure.
On its 10th birthday, a bit of a washed-out birthday party. No fireworks for the euro. Definitely, it was 10 years ago today that many countries in the eurozone, like France and Germany, began trading the euro for the first time. One of the curious things about this whole crisis in Europe has been the fact that the euro seems to have been weathering the whole thing pretty well. In fact, you can see there from our graph of the year 2011 and the euro, up until the summer, the euro was doing pretty well against the dollar, around 150. And then that whole eurozone debt crisis started to really take its toll on the markets. And ever since, the euro has been trickling down and down, currently trading below $1.30. Some economists and some traders would say, well, that's a good price for the euro. It's good for competitivity when you consider countries like Japan, whose currency is so badly overvalued, but hardly the kind of thing that sends out, it gives investors confidence on its 10th birthday.
So, as Owen was saying, on its 10th birthday, the euro finds itself somewhat unloved by foreign exchange traders. The economic turned political crisis has led to many leading banks and firms planning for a breakup of the single currency. Even Germany, the country which co-founded the euro and hosts its central bank, isn't immune to noises about a return to the Deutschmark. In the first of a new series, our correspondents have been testing the euro mood among manufacturers in Berlin.
Ditch the euro? Sound tempting? Not to German companies who are export champions. This small Berlin business makes contraptions out of rope for kids. 75% of its turnover is generated abroad. The company's CEO, David Köhler, says a return to the Deutschmark would be a catastrophe.
German products will get more expensive because if we bring back the Deutschmark, it's likely it would be the strongest European currency. All the other countries would have problems paying in Deutschmarks, which would lead to a huge drop in exports.
Historically a sound currency, the resurrected Deutschmark would soar in value by 40 or 50%, putting the brakes on exports. The knock-on effect would be one bankruptcy after another, pushing unemployment through the roof and squeezing domestic demand. The country would be thrown into an unprecedented recession, and that's the stuff of Germany's worst nightmares, as this coin expert remembers.
Domestic demand in Germany is a secondary factor, but if that's strangled as well as exports, that would be a double blow. Then we'll have a complete economic catastrophe similar to the situation in the 30s, when no one had a job.
But a return to the Deutschmark wouldn't only put businesses and individuals at risk. Banks as well as pension schemes would suffer huge losses. The result, large swathes of Germany's financial capital would be wiped out.
Saving deposits wouldn't be secure. Every single pension plan or other insurance would be at risk. It's unclear whether private savers who've been slowly putting away money would ever see that again. The state would have to jump in, and the consequences of that are incalculable.
To compensate for the losses, the German state would have to go into debt like never before.
Well, as Chris said, we'll have reports through the week on that 10th anniversary for the euro, including a couple of reports from France. Would you believe you can still cash in your francs? Not for long, though, so we'll be testing the mood there in France about whether people really want to hang on to the old currency. Let's leave the eurozone alone for the moment and just take a look at the markets. A very quiet day's trade, largely because so many of the major markets are closed for a New Year public holiday. The Hang Seng, the Nikkei all shut. Just the Kospi in South Korea trading on the Asian markets this Monday. You can see it's just managed to poke back into the green a little bit, around 0.3%, but had a fairly flat morning. Let's get a little bit more of the day's business headline. Let's get a few more of the day's business headlines for you even. Oil refiner Petroplus has started shutting down 3 of its European plants over a credit crisis. Refineries in the firm's native Switzerland, as well as France and Belgium, are all stopping production. The suspension was announced after 13 Petroplus lenders froze a €765 million credit line. French and Swiss ministers are expected to join the company for negotiations with the banks to ask them to restart lending.
Meanwhile, Exxon has won just a fraction of the compensation it was seeking from the Venezuelan government over losses incurred through a nationalisation programme. Under the ruling from a New York court, the US oil giant will receive around $750 million from state-owned Petróleos. That's less than a tenth of the $10 billion damages it was chasing. It's among a number of foreign investors currently suing Hugo Chávez's regime after he began nationalising key assets in natural resources.
A group of Porsche investors are suing the German car maker for €2 billion to recoup their losses from the failed Volkswagen takeover. The complaint follows Porsche's decision in September to abandon a merger first floated in 2008. They blame Porsche for inflicting severe losses on their VW portfolios when the rival car maker's shares surged and then dived.
And Brazil's minimum wage has risen by nearly 15%, the lowest monthly salary now equivalent to $332. The increase is part of a package of measures introduced as the economy continues to expand by nearly 4%, with huge construction projects for the 2014 World Cup and 2016 Olympics. Next, the battle for the fields in America's heartland. Presidential candidates are in Iowa to test the mood over who might end up winning the White House this year. Anyone serious about winning votes in this Midwestern state must be serious about the biofuel ethanol. It provides a living for thousands of farmers. But with $20 billion of subsidies expiring amid a budget crisis, both voters and candidates face some hard choices.
In Iowa, a focus on the economy means a focus on farms. Iowa is the nation's top producer of corn, soybeans, and pork.
The fact is that agriculture is the backbone of what we can do in this country, and it's been the backbone forever of this country's economics.
That's the message farmers here deliver to the presidential candidates who come calling every 4 years. And they seek promises that whoever gets to the White House will protect the agricultural sector. For decades, that's meant big subsidies for producers of ethanol, which is made here from Iowa corn.
Now, I have a very practical reason of being for ethanol. If I have to choose between $1 billion going to Iran and $1 billion going to Iowa, I prefer Iowa.
This year, though, the farmers aren't seeing similar support all around.
The nation's affection for ethanol in and of itself has sort of waned a little bit. The subsidies are scheduled to run out at the end of this year, and that's not the litmus test.
Subsidies may fall to the budget-cutting acts, but experts say a federal mandate for refiners to use more than 12 billion gallons of ethanol in 2012 will still help them. And farmers are also looking to candidates to cut regulations and work better trade deals.
That's more likely to be the kind of promises you're getting out of the candidates, what they'll close, who they'll fire, and whose feet to the fire they intend to hold.
Though Iowa's farmers see subsidies drying up, they want Washington to share that pain by cutting subsidies for other energy like oil and wind. And they want candidates to keep a safety net for when crops fail or prices fall.
Owen Fairclough, thanks very much for joining us. That's it for business. More news coming up very shortly with Stuart. Do stay tuned to Live from Paris.